Prior to his 10 years as a news commentator on TV, he served as White House press secretary in the Johnson administration. Today, he's probably best known for his extensive involvement with public television, yielding such programs as The Power of Myth, Faith and Reason, and Buying the War. He has received over 30 Emmy Awards and virtually every other major television journalism prize, but is also a well-known critic of the media. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with Emmy and Peabody Award winner, journalist Bill Moyers. Public television today, is it what you imagined it would become?
No, it isn't. When LBJ, President Johnson, signed the Public Broadcasting Act in 1967, we envisioned being far more adequately funded than we are. And while money's not everything, it plays a huge role in the creativity, the range, the scope of what you can do. So public broadcasting is still tethered to, is still an underfunded medium. Now, despite that, over the last 40 years, we have produced from the arts and travel and documentaries and interview conversation shows and specials, from the NewsHour to Frontline. We have produced some remarkable television that has touched the lives of millions of people. But we have done so little compared to what we could do if we had the resources that others do. I mean, for example, the BBC, which is funded by a designated fee on television sets involved, has about $4 to $6 billion a year that it spends. We have for programming, about $500 million a year. Within the narrow confines of necessity, I think people can be proud of public broadcasting. Great moments in the life of our nation, Watergate hearings and so forth. But in terms of what we could yet be, we're not there yet. And
given the chance to create at this moment, should it be funded by the government or should it be corporate underwriting in that direction?
See, it's funded by taxpayers. The government is a filter, a transmission, but it's funded by taxpayers because when we started public broadcasting, President Johnson said there should be one channel on the spectrum that is free of commercials and free of commercial values. We tried to get a BBC-like tax, but Wilbur Mills, who was then chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, where all tax legislation originates, came down to the little room. It's now called the Monica Lewinsky room, but it was then just a little study off the Oval Office. And LBJ tried to persuade him to go for this designated task. And Wilbur Mills finally, after 2 hours, leaned over to him and said, "Now, Lyndon, you know we ain't going to fund anything we don't control." So it would be more desirable if our money came from other than the Treasury, from the taxpayers, but that's the way we began, and began with a very short shortage. In Germany, England, other democratic societies, the per capita contribution to public media is about $80 a year, $80. In this country, in the United States, $1.49 that is contributed through the Treasury, Congress, to public broadcasting. Not nearly enough. I mean, people deserve more than that. People deserve a fully funded public media. And that is the public in public broadcasting. It is the folks who are watching right now who should be benefiting from what we do and should be happy to be pay modestly for it. I mean, look what they pay for a Starbucks coffee today, more than they contribute every year to public broadcasting.
Okay, now I'm going to take you way back.
Yeah.
Very beginning.
Sure.
Little boy, what did you want to do?
Everything. I wanted to be in journalism. I wanted to go into the ministry. I wanted to go into government. I wanted to be a pilot, and I joined the ROTC when I got older than that. I didn't know what I was going to do when I grew up. And, you know, I haven't grown up yet, and I still don't know what I want to do.
From the checklist, you've done most of those.
I sorted it out because through a series of circumstances, high school teacher who was my journalism tutor on the high school newspaper recommended me to the local newspaper in Marshall, Texas, the Marshall News Messenger. At 16, I got a job because of the Korean War. They wanted somebody to write stories about the young men who were being drafted or are joining to go into the Korean War. They wanted to keep track of them in the local newspaper. I got that job. One day, a senior reporter was sick. I was asked to cover the revolt of the Marshall Housewives, which was a group of women who decided they were not going to contribute anymore to Social Security for their domestic help. One thing led to another. I got recognized for that from the Associated Press, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
I mean, once you see that byline, it's like a drug, and I was hooked. But I took a meandering course back to journalism through the ministry. I have a Master's of Divinity degree, through the ROTC, through politics and government for 7 years when I was in the Kennedy-Johnson administration. Then again, through a fortuitous set of circumstances, a guy who'd seen me, owner of a newspaper, who was aging, his wife had died, he needed somebody to come run his newspaper. His only relationship with me was seeing me do my briefings as the White House press secretary.
Yeah.
He came to see me, offered me that job. I said, no, I'm not leaving yet. I can't. 6 months later, I needed to leave for a lot of reasons, and I wound up publishing a newspaper. It was sold, and somebody, when I did a book called Listening to America, came to Houston, Beaumont, for that book. It was my first book. It became a bestseller. Somebody in public television read that book and saw that I had an ear for listening, wanted a host for a broadcast like this. That was
the rest
was
is
it.
history.
I was
But
hooked.
taking back though, there's a letter you write to LBJ at
Yeah.
one point saying, "I want to help."
There was a time when I wanted to be when I was going to be a journalist. But when I went to college, the first 2 years I covered local politics, college politics, and I decided I want to be a political journalist. It was the time of the McCarthy hearings, and that got me really involved in in politics in a different way beyond elections and campaigns. And I sat down one April afternoon and wrote a short note to a man I'd never met, Lyndon Johnson, who had just become the Senate Majority Leader of the Democrats in the Senate, was running for re-election in Texas, had no opposition. And I presumptuously said, you know, I can help you in your re-election. You can help me learn politics so that I can be a political journalist. The letter got to this day, if you want to get my attention, and I learned this from Lyndon Johnson, write me a letter. LBJ said that if you write the right letter, and if it's a true letter, an authentic letter, you can tell more about the writer of it from that letter than you can almost from seeing that person in person. A letter reveals character, motivation, ability, and learning. And that letter got to his desk. He had somebody call me. I went up and worked for them that summer. We bonded, and that was it. You know, there's a line from Shakespeare: "Merit doth much, but fortune more."
Yeah.
My life has been one run of good luck after another. I've made my mistakes, stumbled, was able to get up, and through fortune, good luck, keep doing it. I've had so many opportunities, enjoyed every one of them, failed at some of them, but good luck has been, you know, young people say, what should you do? What should I do with my life? And I say, be lucky like me.
Yeah.
You know?
Fortune, luck, how does that play in then to faith?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is the result of faith or if it's an inherited trait or just living a long time. But I don't know how to be in the world without imagining a more confident future and then getting up every morning to try to do something to try to bring that future about. Now, I don't know where that comes from because the evangelical conservative faith in which I grew up was an apocalyptic faith. It was a faith that taught we're all original sinners and that the human venture never comes to good purpose, and you have to make your plans for the afterlife, where if you've been a good person, the rewards will come. I moved beyond that a long time ago. I can't imagine what the afterlife is. Don't think about it. Mm-hmm. I know that all I can figure out is that I have this time on earth, and if I don't do something about this day, I'm not sure of having another day.
Is there a different you today when it comes to theological concerns from the one who went to divinity school and all of that? Have you changed?
Of course I've changed. I'm 77 years old. If I hadn't changed, I'd still be wearing diapers and sucking my thumb. No, I'm serious about that. Every experience creates a new reality. If you're open, I'll be different. You'll be different when we leave this interview. The people I meet today will somehow leave something of themselves with me, and I hopefully with them. So every experience creates a new reality. Do I hold to the bumper sticker creed of the religion that was taught me when I was growing up? No. Do I still believe that human beings are capable of a transcendental experience, whether it's being open to surprise, beauty, love? Yes, I do believe that there are moments in which the brain seems to dissolve and we're one with the universe. No, I can't explain that. I wouldn't try to explain that. Sounds mystical, sounds New Age. It's not. It's just the sense that, in fact, there's a lot of neuroscience now that confirms what these particular scientists at the University of San Diego call the God spot. The God spot's in the back of the brain, and from picturing it, imaging it, they can see the brain changing in the response to something sublime, something beautiful, something glorious, like Brahms' Requiem, and the brain actually is doing something about that. So I think that experience, every experience you have like that, deepens your awareness of the fact that it's not about me, myself, and I all the time.
Yeah. When you change direction in life, how do you keep from making it feel like failure and making it seem like growth?
When it's failure, you'll know it.
Yeah.
You will. And I've had my share of them. And I never think of it as growth. I think of it as response to a situation I had not anticipated, a person I had not yet met, to some inward phenomenon that you don't really understand. I mean, this body and this brain are incredible instruments, and they are almost at times, it seems to me, on autopilot.
Yeah.
They are negotiating through the world, and you're just you're just the co-pilot on automatic pilot. Somebody else, the experience is carrying you along. Well, you do. There are times when I've sat down and said, why in the world did I make that choice or that decision or produce that broadcast? Or not be indifferent to my wife. Why when she was trying to tell me something important was I distracted, or when my son was reaching out for help, I didn't hear him. And then I'll sit down and think, what's wrong with you? Or what can you do differently? But you can't do that every day, and you can't do it all the time, or you'll be crippled with gazing in your own navel and trying to do too much examination.
Yeah. How much of what you are as a person do you take on to air with you? And how much of your beliefs and things that you hold true to yourself or that you value do you bring with you, and how much do you have to leave behind to be a good journalist?
Well, I don't quantify it that way. I don't know. I mean, obviously, you're affected by the technical environment, the lights, the camera, the ticking clock that we both know is moving against our conversation all the time. But I would never say something on the air that I wouldn't say privately. I wouldn't say something that went at odds with what I was actually thinking. I make mistakes and seem sometimes to stumble and all that. But Edward R. Murray said there's nothing wrong with bias as long as you don't hide it. And I try not to hide mine. I mean, I consider myself a progressive, liberal. That's because I'm optimistic about our chances of doing better together than I am when it's every man for himself. And I don't hide that, but I can listen to somebody who disagrees with me or with whom I disagree as appropriately as you're listening to me. And I don't come at my conversations and my interviews or my documentaries or my report with a preconceived conclusion as to where I'm going to wind up. The great thing about journalism is that, I've said journalism is a continuing course in adult education, mine. And I'm lucky to have a classroom to share it with. But I learn from every interview, from every documentary, from every series that I do, because I don't know when I began where it's going to take me. And if I were convicted that I had to bring it out to where I wanted it to be, I wouldn't be learning. I would be enacting an indoctrinated, preconceived agenda. And that's not fun. I mean, I wouldn't be a good ideologue. I wouldn't be a good a preacher who knows the answer before he asks the question. I just can't do that. And I think that's one reason I've had such a long run at it and a good time with it, is because repeating myself, every experience is a new reality.
When you talk about having a long run at it, there have been times where you've retired. What lead to those decisions and then the decisions to come back?
Well, the decision to come back is always because I have no retirement skills. But no, it's more than that. It's not because I'm a Gemini. It's not because I can't make up my mind. We raise every penny of every production we mount. My wife and I, she runs our company, another Texan. She's a good journalist in her own right. And we raise every penny of every production we mount. That takes time. And so I'll raise the funds. We'll raise the funds for a mini-series, a multi-part series, Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth, Healing in the Mind, or for a single documentary, Capital Crime, Trade Secrets, something like that, or for a weekly series, like now with Bill Moyers, that ran after 9/11 until 2005, and then I retired at the age of 70, came back 2 years later, raised the funds for Bill Moyers' Journal. It takes time to raise money. Like, yes, you get tired. A weekly broadcast takes its toll. But you also need to be constantly raising money. Great cartoon in the New Yorker a month ago, bum, poorly shaven, poorly dressed, somehow made his way into a very fancy New York party, and he's saying to the socialite, I spend half my time raising money, Well, I do too. So when I retired in May of 2010, last year, it was because I needed a break. My wife and I wanted to see our grandkids more frequently. There was some traveling we wanted to do. We had some old friends we'd not seen in a long time. And I also needed to go raise some money if I were going to do anything. I didn't expect that I would. I thought 76 was the right time to bow out.
Yeah.
But as I say, I'm back, coming with a new program called Moyers and Company, because I can. I have the health, I have the support, I have a great team, and why not?
Yeah. You mentioned 9/11 a little bit ago, and I'm curious, from your point of view, how do you think we as a nation changed from that incident?
Made us much more nervous and paranoid. I mean, I came from Austin to Houston the other day. The line at the security gates I never seen them like that, even at Kennedy or Newark in New York. Huge, long line. And I'll never go through a line like that I don't think the terrorists won. They won. Yeah. Their purpose, they knew they couldn't destroy the country, but they knew they could change the country by getting inside our head, by governing us from in there through fear, and rightful fear. I mean, terrorism is for real, as we learned that day. My office was just a mile or so from there. Our engineer, public broadcasting engineer in New York, was stationed atop the World Trade Center. He died in that. And my wife and I went down to keep our station on the air. PBS called me and asked me to do a nightly half-hour show, just like this one, for 3 or 4 weeks after that, just to try to find voices who could speak to the chaos. And they were all changed. Everyone I interviewed, they had been affected by this convulsion that had been visited upon the complacency of America. So we're more nervous, less willing to talk to each other, more polarized, I think, because there are those who will use that fear to try to gain political advantage and scare the hell out of the people who don't vote for them, or think they can scare the people into voting for them. We've changed in that way. I think, in a way, there's a greater recognition that the empire is not worth it, that there's a limit to how far even a great and rich nation like ours can intrude into the world without creating disturbances that bring a backlash. And I actually think in some ways, not politically, but in some ways, we're a more mature nation for having suffered, for having been attacked. Every experience creates a new reality. And I think Americans are tempered. Again, not politically, because politically our politics has descended to an adolescent level. There's something of the trust that once was a kind of hope about the future, faith about the future, that's been lost, and that people are almost reluctant to listen to others these days. They want to listen to them, to like-minded. We live in silos because of the way our political system and our media system have evolved. We almost live in silos with very little contact. I'm not optimistic at the moment about our situation because we seem unable to solve any problem.
When you talk about the silos, the irony of it all is we're at a point in our history where we have more opportunity to have more sharing of ideas than ever, and yet we use this technology to narrow in on what we look at.
I used to love to read newspapers because I'd be surprised by what I read. You read this story that you wanted to read, and there's another one next to it, and it has a point of view that I haven't gone looking for. It may be a column by a conservative or a report on something that I'm unfamiliar with, and I'm surprised to be reading about something I didn't know. Today we're all our own editors. We go on the web and we construct our own newspaper. We take the remote or the clicker or the computer, the iPad, the thumb moving across the slick page, and we create our own world where we feel at home. We should be much more familiar. We should be much more at home in a world we don't understand, and it's always saying things to us we don't know.
So how do we then spread that out? What's the responsibility of us as journalists?
You have to work at it. You really have to work at it. You have to talk to people you don't want to talk to. You have to talk to people you don't like. You have to listen to people you don't think have anything to learn from. You have to give the other person the benefit of some benefit of the doubt. I don't give everybody I hear some benefit. There are people lying to me when I interview them, and I know that. So I can't give them the benefit of the doubt. But you have to try very hard to be open to the world with a discriminating editorial faculty that enables you to discriminate between when somebody's trying to manipulate you and somebody's trying to inform you. But you have to work at it. In our medium, we need to cast a big net and bring as many people into it as we can. I hear from people who disagree with me all the time and I'm glad of that. And so I answer them. I respond to them. I do my own emailing, and I want to hear what they say.
Yeah. When you talk about not very optimistic right now for the future, how do we get hope back for all of us?
Well, there's a crisis of hope in the country right now. We're in the toughest economic time since when I was born, in the worst hard times of the Great Depression. One story after another talks about the growing inequality. The gap between the top and everybody else is larger than it's been in 29 years. The heart of the American dream, every immigrant, back to the Pilgrims and the Puritans, came here because they believed they could do better in the New World than they did then, and they could do better than their parents had done. That social mobility has been a casualty of the great change in the American economy in the last 30 years, in which the rewards of a growing economy have grown largely to the top, while the middle class has been shrinking and poor people have been almost forgotten. And so there is a crisis of hope among people who thought they could get a foot on the first rung and go up the ladder in time, steadily, slowly. They didn't want a lot. They wanted a place to live, food for the body, clothes for the body. They wanted education for their children and health care for their family. That was the essence of it when I was growing up. And when I was in the 50s and 60s, when I was coming into my majority, most of the gains in the economy did go to the bottom 90% of the country. So that I, with the parents of a guy with a 4th grade education and a mother with an 8th grade education, had a chance to get ahead. Look, my parents were the poorest white folks in town, and yet I was the equivalent of my friend who was the daughter of the richest family in town, because we both went to the same public schools, good public schools. We both had access to the same good public library. We had use of the public park where I played football and she swung in the swings. We went on good public roads with good public facilities to a good state university, a good public university, University of Texas. I was as rich in public goods as she was in private goods. And the public goods were more important to me than private goods, because how many cars can you own? How many homes can you own? How much money can you spend? We're losing that. We're privatizing our public space. We're privatizing our public schools, privatizing almost everything public. And the public space that is accessible to people who don't have rich parents is shrinking. And that's really troubling us. We cannot survive half democracy and half oligarchy any more than we could survive half slave and half free. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not against money. I'm not against capital. I believe in it myself. But predatory capitalism and predatory wealth that is aimed to prevent other people from rising is a threat. And if we don't find a way to deal with it, then we'll wind up an America divided into winners and losers, with very few winners, a lot of losers, and no sympathy for them. That's the cause of my pessimism at the moment.
You mentioned earlier that clock ticking. It ran out.
Okay.
A pleasure. Thank you for your stories and all of your work.
Thank you very much. Good
Bill
job.
Moyers.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of Interviews, please visit HoustonPBS.org.